Welcome, super sober heroes, to another episode of Gay A, the Queer Sober Hero Show. It's your host, Steve, here with 1,346 days of sobriety still, because if you listened to last week's episode, you already know this, but my buddy Phil and I are going to be interviewed by AI today. Welcome back again, Phil.
Hey, Steve, it's good to be here as always.
Yes. And so I believe that this was inspired around or shortly after I did my episode where I interviewed myself with AI.
Yeah, that's exactly how this little brainchild of mine came to be.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea, though, because even when I did that format in the episode, which I'll link back to the show notes for if people missed it so they want to see what I'm talking about, it was really creepy, but it still was me answering or having AI answer the same questions that I ask my guests each week. So I love the idea of letting them pick some new questions. I sent over the list before. Do you have one that stood out to you where you're like, oh, that's a really good question, or one you want to start with?
Give me a second, because honestly, it was a lot.
I sent you a whole block of text moments before we hit record.
Because actually,
I have one that popped out for me that I'll ask for you that I like is, what would you say are some misconceptions about queer sober life that you wish more people understood who aren't sober queers?
So I think the biggest misconception I've experienced is that people think that all I do is get up, go to work, go to a meeting, go home, climb into bed alone, cry myself to sleep, rinse and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
That is the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
I get up, I hit the gym, I have a fantastic day. Sometimes I hit a meeting, sometimes I get together with friends and go do something. Actually, just before we got on Zoom, I had a group of sober folks that were talking about going to mini golf on Wednesday. And I was actually looking at my calendar going, I actually could do that. So the biggest common misconception that I've experienced is that people think that just because I'm gay and sober means that I don't have a life. I do. I told the listeners in the last episode, I just threw myself a fabulous 42nd birthday party that had about 55 people. There were three very different aspects of my life all converged in that room.
Mm-hmm.
There were folks from my church. There were folks from graduate school. There were folks from my recovery meetings. And honestly, I had a bit of anxiety about it, but they all just got along. It was the weirdest thing. So the biggest misconception is that sober gays don't know how to have fun. These were jumped out of a plane last April.
Yeah.
Just because I'm sober does not mean that I don't know how to have fun.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that because I understand the fun thing and I definitely get that. And I've gotten that a lot. And it made sense almost at first when I was more of a gamer. People are like, oh, you're a homebody. That makes sense. Or even now when I do fitness, if I do something during the day that's physical, like when I do my Spartan race, they're like, that's sober and gay. It makes sense. But it almost seems like what the gay and sober people get most confused when I go out and do things at night. And it doesn't even mean bar, but it seems like people assume that I can even live a full, happy life in sobriety during the day, but that I turn into a pumpkin or a bumpkin at night and just curl up in wilts like at midnight. And so that's when people are shocked, is when they see me out like at a bar or at a club or at an event where I'm out dancing. They're like, how are you doing that and you're sober? And that's what I find is the biggest misconception that a lot of people have, that we can't be around alcohol, which I couldn't at first, but after a while you have the tools, you learn how to function as a person again in society. So
Exactly.
it helps.
Yeah, exactly. You're down in Sarasota, Florida, and got all the major cities of Florida to pop into and whatnot. So there's a lot more nightlife down there.
Mm.
Honestly, Steve, you and I are already talking because I'm going to be in Florida next month.
Yeah.
We're probably going to go out dancing.
Yes, I definitely love going out, but anything that we do in our sobriety, I just love challenging those expectations that people have. I know that a lot of the expectations, even that we have, like when we first got sober, what's that been like for you, especially now that you have your own place? Share with it.
I'm pretty sure I said it on the first episode that I was on way back when. but I can't say for certain right now. But when I'm in meetings and I'm asked to share my full story, there's usually a line that I went from running the best little whorehouse in northern Rockland County to live in a monastery.
Yeah.
Because prior to sobriety, prior to recovery, my ex and I were big meth addicts. And there's a lot of sex on meth. It is what it is. And like you said, I had to untangle all of that. And now that I'm back living on my own, when I want to scratch that itch, I do. When I don't, it's a lot easier to have my own place and be like, hey, come on over. Full transparency, listeners. Part of the appeal of this particular apartment building is the fact that one of my favorite suck buddies lives 3 floors down.
There you go. All right. And another question here that I enjoyed, but I'm going to add a little spice to it is, what's one piece of wisdom you'd pass on to someone in their first year of sobriety that you didn't hear or learn?
That I didn't.
It's something that you've learned out in the real world since getting sober that you wish someone like would tell you in your first year in the rooms.
Ooh, that's a deep one. I'm trying to think back to 6 years ago when I was a year sober and still trying to figure it all out. I wasn't a tweaked out asshole.
No.
I was just a normal asshole.
I thought of one as I was reading it, but even then, half the time we hear something someone says that we think they said it, they've heard it in another meeting. We've been to enough meetings to learn that they heard it in a meeting. Last year when I was reading The Courage to be Disliked, they talked about like a parable of 10 people in a room. 7 are going to ignore you no matter what you do. One's going to hate you no matter what you do, and 2 or 3 are going to love you. But pay attention to the people that you're vibing with, like the people that love you, not the person who hates you or the people who are ignoring you. That's been a visual, just remembering that in the room, there's always going to be that 2 or 3. It gives me hope where if I'm not vibing with one of the first couple people that I meet, those are the 7 that I'm not going to vibe with, but I just got to find the people that I will and stick with those. I'm sure there's a version of that in 12-step work, but that was just a way it was put that really resonated with me.
Yeah, no, and that's fantastic advice. And I really think that people that are not in recovery, that are not sober, the normies, the muggles, if you're a Harry Potter person, I think they need that advice too, because everybody's got a degree of they're going to love me, they're going to hate me. Why is he ignoring me? All of that. So that's some fantastic advice. Actually, you know what? Totally thought of my answer to this question.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually my godfather and uncle, one person, 2 titles in my life. He literally just looked at me and said, don't let the bastards get you down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he originally said it in Latin, and I looked at him and said, it's been a while. So can I get a translation? And it was like, don't let the bastards get you down. And whether that's the bastards of Uncle Sam because it's tax season, or the bastards of like your boss because you didn't get that promotion or that pay raise, or the bastard that you did a job interview with and they didn't offer you the job. Listeners, seriously, don't let the bastards get you down. And because this is a gay podcast, don't ever let anybody dim that flame. The community has struggled for so long, and the fight's gearing back up right now. So don't ever let anybody dull your flame.
Yeah. And I love that a lot of people will find this podcast early on in their recovery, but people have never really found it when they're sober, but just discovering they're queer as much as people know that they're gay because they find it me like searching. But so if someone is already familiar with the concept of chosen family, how has that meant to you changed in your like applying the whole concept from our community of chosen family? How has that meaning evolved for you in your recovery?
I love the chosen family.
Mm-hmm.
But I also acknowledge that within the LGBT community, I am a different kind of unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because, when I came out at 19, my parents tossed me out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But After 6 weeks, my mother threatened to divorce my father if he didn't go and find me, and I was back home. And I share that because that's just part of my personal history. I fully acknowledge that there are a lot of folks in the community that didn't have that sort of dynamic with their biological families and whatnot. The chosen family for me is such an important thing because we accept each other for 100% of who we are. Not because, oh, that's my brother, I have to love him. And not, oh, he's got a big bank account, he'll take care of me. He's a good person. He's had a similar struggle. I can turn to him when I'm struggling. Or even if he doesn't have the same struggle, he's still a good listener. He's kind, he's caring. He actually gives a shit about me, because so many of us deal with that feeling like shit and nobody cares about us. One of the most common things I heard in my first year in the rooms was inevitably it came from some random person that had multiple decades. They go, nobody has told you today, I love you. Guess what? Somebody just did. I love every single person in this room.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, honestly, I heard that more in non LGBT specific meetings.
Yeah.
So chosen family is so important to me because on the greater scale of things, I come from a relatively small family and a lot of my relatives have already passed on.
Mm-hmm.
Chosen family for me is a bit different because there are people here now in 2025, recent years. My church community is, people ask me why I started going back to church. And I started going back to church after my parents died. For me, it's a connection to my parents, even though my parents never stepped foot in the state of Minnesota. There's a commonality in our church that people get me there. I've got a really healthy relationship with my aunt who is back in New Jersey. And when I'm annoyed and frustrated with her, I talk about it with somebody at my church here in Minneapolis
Mm-hmm.
because they get it. The easiest way that I generally explain it is different family trees, but we're all in the same orchard. So chosen family is such an important thing because family is where you get unconditional love. Sometimes we're lucky and it's there. And even though we're lucky and it's there, we still need to add on to it. So,
Yeah. I loved in sobriety, whether it was in gay meetings or just meetings that are just meetings, but it was like hearing that thing about loving me until I love myself, and like experiencing over the years the concept of found family, both in the rooms and out in the rooms, now that I'm able to have deeper connections as a sober person than I did during my addiction. During my active addiction, I was convinced chosen family meant it's just like your real family. They'll leave you when things get hard. And I didn't know that the whole chosen family meant they could actually be like, they'll actually stay with you and support you and build you up, because I didn't have that even in my active addiction, like with my gay community, because I would isolate when I would drink. So it's been cool learning that in sobriety.
what's your go-to response when somebody says, I can't imagine being queer and sober?
People don't generally put it together, but it's basically whether they said it was like being gay or queer, or whether it was being sober, it'd be like, I can't imagine not. I can't imagine my life today if I was drinking, because I would be dead. I would be like in the ground. It would have been game over, and it will be game over again. So I just don't do that. But also,
Right.
I would never want to be straight. I know that this isn't a choice because this is how I was born, but if I could choose it, I wouldn't choose to be anything other than who I am today. So I wouldn't like both of those things. Ew, like straight or drinking, Steve? No, thank you. I don't want that. Ugh. Ugh.
Yeah.
What
Well,
about you?
actually, I love it. Even though I'm out here 2 years, my New York mouth was like, as soon as I read it, I'm like, well, You don't have to imagine it because it's my life.
Yeah.
That kind of like smart, ready response. And my life today is so much better than I ever thought it would be. So I hope that the listeners realize that just keep moving in the right direction and your life will continue to get better. Sometimes quickly, sometimes all the time.
Slowly.
And Steve, it was great to see you, and thanks for having me.
I'll add all your ats in the show notes. So listeners, make sure you connect with Phil and join us at Here Queer Sober in September. What dates again?
September 27th, 28th, 29th, New York City, Marriott Marquis, a prime location.
It's going to be a party. I'll see you all there.
E